I just got a new piece of audio gear, the RØDECaster Duo, and I am replacing with this thing a very well battle-tested Behringer UMC 204 HD. This has been in production use now for well over almost 3 years. Every single YouTube video, tailscale video, podcast has been recorded through this via USB into my laptop and into Audacity. But just last week, for some reason, I lost an audio recording. Now I'm going to walk you through my sort of production process as I sit at the desk right here. So there's a few pieces of gear to look at. And the first one is this. This is the Atomos Ninja 5. Behind the teleprompter is a Canon R6 Mark II set into clean HDMI out mode, which comes in here. This then is a recorder. So you can see, look, there's me. Hi. This is a recorder. So if I start pressing record here, you'll see, hopefully I'll cut to that in post. The video then comes in here and there is a LUT applied before it gets to the output. So now we're at the output stage here. And this cable comes down here into one of my 2 Thunderbolt docks. And I only recently added the second Thunderbolt dock this morning. But I'll get to that in just a second. The HDMI cable here comes out of the Atomos Ninja. Well, I should say it records to an SSD at the back here. This is a 2.5-inch SATA SSD. And then I will pull the SSD out of the back, just a normal SATA SSD, and then I'll hook it up to this little doohickey down here, which is a SATA to USB-C little adapter. And then I'll put the files over 10 gig networking across the network to my NAS. And then I can edit from anywhere. You know, I have 10 gig in the house, which is, I have 2 desks. I have the one behind me, which is where I actually edit all of the videos. And then I have one downstairs, which also has 10 gig as well, which I sometimes use in the bonus room. That HDMI cable comes out of the back and into a very basic, I think this is a 4K capture, HDMI capture device. I think that cost me about $15, $20 years ago. It does 4K 30, which, you know, for a talking head setup is, you know, genuinely all you actually need. And then from there, what I will typically do is I'll bring up OBS on the laptop. And let's say I want to do a Zoom call or something like that. You know, you can see I've already got the audio into the video, into macOS. And I can drag this around, you know, do whatever you do with OBS, okay? Then sometimes some videos, I just find it really difficult to get started. And for whatever reason, I find it easier to talk to myself. So I have up here the Elgato Prompter XL. And this is a monster. I mean, this is a 15-inch display, I think, something like 15-inch display, 27-inch 4K monitor here, 15-inch here, and then a 24-inch 1080p one just here for, you know, chat and web browsers and just notes that I need to keep, you know, visible on that side. But what I can do when I'm feeling, you know, just not feeling the mood or whatever, there's this option in OBS here called Preview Projector, and I can send this to the Prompter XL, and then I'm just literally just sat here talking to myself. I mean, I'm the only one that makes sense to me anyway. But I just find it really easy to just to talk to myself back and forward. But the problem I had on Friday was that, you know, I've made hundreds of videos in this room, and I always just scratch the top of the mic so that I see the scratch and it can't possibly be picked up by a different mic. So it's really quiet. And I look for that on the waveform in Audacity or something like that. And for whatever reason, on Friday, I didn't do that. And I lost the take. I had a whole 20-minute video for work shot, and it used the flipping MacBook Pro studio mic, which is, of course, it's never going to beat an Electro Voice RE20. This thing This thing sounds just like butter. I mean, I know exactly what my voice sounds like in this room through this microphone. And I was a little bit worried about switching out anything to do with the audio because I do like it so much, to be honest with you. But I have this microphone on the Elgato low profile mic arm right here. I absolutely love this thing. Typically it just folds away nice and neat out the corner. And then when I'm not recording, I've got full access to the desk. And then when I am recording, there you go, there it is. Set up and ready to go. What I was hoping to do with this Rodecaster was to put something physically in the signal chain between the RE20 and my laptop that didn't require software, because that was the thing, right? I was recording directly into Audacity, and I still am going to do that, by the way. But the problem at the weekend, or on Friday, was that I didn't select the correct input in Audacity. And in my defense, I mean, look at this interface for a start. Like, why doesn't it? This is one of the most critical settings in the entire recording ecosystem. Why is it hidden behind 2 or 3 submenus? Why is the active microphone not front and center displayed? What I would normally select here would be the UMC as an input, but now I've got the RØDECaster Duo coming in. You see, I've actually got 2 options of devices. So if I record this now, the Audacity picks up the RE20 just fine, and I'm assuming it sounds okay. I'll switch to the RE20 in post at this point so you can tell the difference between the DJI lapel mic that I'm wearing, one of the DJI Mic 3, the minis, which is hooked up to this Osmo Pocket 4, which, by the way, this gimbal's amazing. When I'm hand-holding stuff, you know, got a nice little tripod, I can just put it on the desk, it fits around all the gear, I'm not dealing with massive, gigantic tripods. It's great. But if I select the wrong input in software, I'm SOL, right? So what I wanted was something between here and there. And that is where the Rodecaster Duo comes into frame. And I can change the volume of the RE20, obviously just by touching this fader right here. But then where it starts to get really pretty cool is I can have, you know, Spotify or something playing. I mean, I'm going to play Spotify to you. It's not that amazing yet, but it gets better, because what I've been wanting for ages is a way to put music out through the speakers and then record it as part of the mix. And so you can see here on fader number 3, that's now coming out through my headphones, which I'll just put on just for fun. These are the DT 1990 Pro open back Beyerdynamic headphones. Open back's really important because otherwise you start shouting and fighting trying to get your voice through. With this, I can actually have the headphones turned down really low and I can still hear myself really clearly. It's pretty nice. But what I can do here is I can literally in real time change the mix. I know you're all probably familiar with what a fader does, but the other thing I can do, you know, it's just wonderful. So I've got Spotify coming in on, so I'll talk over it with the real microphone for a second. And I've got, what have I got here? I've got Spotify on fader 3. I've then got potentially a Google Meet call or some other video conferencing call coming in through Google Chrome. Let me just do a YouTube video just to simulate that for a second. And that now comes out of fader number 2. So I've got my video call on fader number 2. I've got my Spotify music on fader number 3, or whatever I want here, to be honest with you, because they're separate tracks. And I can select that in Sound Source, which is a macOS application by Rogue Amoeba, the same guy that made Airfoil, if you remember that back in the day, that lets you just do an AirPlay to any remote speaker. And I can just literally change here. I want this to go to the Thunderbolt audio, so I can have that go through an analog out as opposed to the digital USB out, or I can have it go to main stereo on the Rode. It's really nice. And then where the Rodecaster Duo finally actually solves my main problem, is that I can record to... I'm just going to put some Stephen Wilson in the background. I think if Pink Floyd did electronic music, this is what they would sound like. Anyway, where the Rodecaster really starts to come into its own, though, is the fact that this does hardware-based recording. In the back here, it has a micro SD card slot as well as a USB-C slot. So I've got double backup. I've got the audio going here. I've then got the audio going to a micro SD card in the back when I press this record button up here, which, by the way, I wish this button was a physical, actual, real button, like up here or something. I don't know. But you can see I've got here a micro SD card as well as USB storage. So I've got 500 gigs of audio storage through this USB SSD that was honestly just sat in a drawer rotting. It's not really big enough for video work. You know, 500 gigs is a couple of projects. And so what was I going to do with it? But the nice thing about this now is that I can hit this record button and I'm recording the tracks exactly as they are mixed in real time here. And so with how I have it set at the moment, Audacity is getting the entire mix. And that's something you can configure in the output routing of the Rodecaster app. Now, I can't do it whilst I'm actually recording, so I'm going to stop recording in just a second, but I want to show you this. Because in the Duo, I'm just going to stop recording over here. I can go into audio setup and then look at the USB one here and go to output routing. And I can do the main mix, which is all channels, or I can do the mix minus that one. So, you know, it's pretty nice. I will say that it's going to take a bit of getting used to, and I really don't... There's a few things about it that, you know... Do
I really need a voice do I really need a voice disguise? Or a large robot?
Or a megaphone? Yes. Hello, testing. You... I mean, it is.
I really don't know what
I'm gonna use.
I'm never going to use half of this stuff in reality. But it's there. That's the point. So the last thing to talk about in terms of my setup is the Thunderbolt docks that are here. Now, this bottom one is the Thunderbolt TS4 from CalDigit, and that is hooked up into this cable here, the front one. Bear in mind, this is an M3 Max MacBook Pro 14-inch. This is a dedicated recording laptop, and each Thunderbolt port has its own dedicated Thunderbolt controller. So I was thinking maybe I'd have to put each cable on either side of the laptop in case it was one controller and two ports and one controller and one port on that side, but that's not the case. So this bottom one is hooked into the big stuff you can see. It's hooked into the HDMI capture, it's hooked into the 4K display, the 1080p display. It's not running the XL prompter because that runs on USB-C and it needs a 10 gigs per second port, but it also needs something like a 15 watt capable port, and I've only got one of those, and that's being used for something else. I forget what over here exactly. But I was out of ports on the TS4, so then I just had a TS3 in a box. I've had this for like 5 years now. And they're only worth about $50 on Facebook Marketplace. So I thought, screw it, I'll keep it. Well, I'm not going to sell that for $50. And this now is hooked up to the Rodecaster Duo is up here and the XL prompter. And that's all that's doing, is literally those two things. Oh yes, the bottom one is hooked up to 10 gig Ethernet as well through an SFP Plus Thunderbolt adapter. And that really is it over here. I'm going to have a Stream Deck, which I don't actually use a great deal unless I am actually, and it's quite rare, but unless I am actually live streaming. I see I do have some things configured here, but for the most part I don't really use it. It's there for show, and it's handy in a pinch. But this is my recording setup. Now, it's on a standing desk. I don't really honestly know why, because I never ever stand up when I'm recording at this desk, ever. I thought I would, but the lights and stuff, this is the Verge Amaran Max. If I did a standing desk setup, I'd punch a bloody hole in the ceiling. And that's my roof, so not a good idea. Got the Elgato key light there. This is an Amaran 60X Halo with the Amaran Light Dome Mini, I think is what it's called. I've got a couple of Amaran bulbs. You know, this is an IKEA light fixture here. So they don't strobe, because they're LED, so they don't strobe on camera. I've then got my main Canon R6 Mark II, so I've got 3 of them in this room. I've got one up here for overhead shots. I've got one here, which normally lives over there when I'm doing my sat at the table wide talking shots. And then, of course, I have the main R6 Mark II back there behind the prompter. This room has been a labour of love to put together, I tell you. And you'd be hard pressed to get me to pull that desk down for anything except an extremely good reason, because it's neat, it's tidy, it just works pretty much reliably all the time. I'm always nervous about swapping out gear, because you just never know, do you? You just never know. But essentially, that is my recording setup. And I record many hours of content every month sat here. So little behind the scenes tour for you, little impromptu thing. I wasn't quite sure what this was going to be, but that's what it turned out to be. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I've been Alex from KTZ Systems.